Hi, this is Chapter 3 for our video lecture. So Chapter 3 is what you should be reading, and it takes us to kind of what I think is really important is sort of the idea art with intention. There will be several different readings, discussions, and there'll be all major projects for this chapter. So art is about communication. We have to communicate something. It's a form of communication. If you're not communicating, then what are you doing? So here's how you communicate your ideas, and we'll look at different approaches within Chapter 3. So there's signs, symbols, metaphors, and analogies, and those are kind of four top things we'll be looking at. So signs, signification, they express an indication of meaning. So they point to something or instruct something about something. They can take forms as sounds, colors, words, or event. Graphic signs representations created and used solely for visual communication. So the signs, you see something and they tell you something and you completely understand it completely. So the form is arbitrary, usually doesn't make sense to why that thing means the thing, but it just does, and it's something that you learn. So iconic signs, realism, representation, and there's conventional signature monograms. So iconic signs is a tree. This thing looks like a tree. It represents a tree, so it is a tree. Conventional signs, signatures, sort of kind of like logos almost. Iconography is representation of pictures, images, art history. So they study the identification or description of interpretation of content of images. So it's a whole part of research where we learn things. So we all know what this is. This is a stop sign. What does this tell you? To stop. The color, the shape, give you something you know. Now this is something that you learned very early on, that this meant stop, and there's no text to indicate it, but if you go anywhere in the world where you see this, you know what this means. Symbols, they convey to the mind an image of something other than itself. So it represents something else. So an idea or concept that would someone you have to draw, and something a little heavier like love. How do you communicate love? Something else by association, resemblance, or convention, something visible representing something invisible. So this means peace. Now this doesn't tell you that it means peace, but it's sort of this complicated idea that it steps into. Now signs and symbols, they are different, but we're just going to probably use them interchangeably. So what does this mean to you? This could mean that only people with handicap signification on their vehicle could park there. This could mean something that is accessible for those who need it. This could mean something that helps those who need a little extra help. So it opens to a lot of different interpretations. Oh, what does this mean? So this is the Nike swoosh, and something very simple means something huge. This could be the corporation, this could be the shoe, this could be hats, this could be so many different things. Metaphor. So metaphor is comparison of two things to be, and not using like or as, like in a simile. He is a pig, tough as leather. Those are metaphors. They do not analyze, formulate new concept for the imagination. They say one thing is another thing. Now, in art, we kind of use them more loosely. Metaphors are often rooted in heritage, identity, myths, dreams, alternate realities, and humor when you use them within work or when you're sharing a story. There's semiotics, which is the philosophical theory of signs, symbols, and systems of signification. If you are more interested in this, you can definitely go dive deeper into semiotics. So, night owl. What does this make you think of? Well, in art, it could be something very similar in kind of pushing the concept an extra step. So night owl is a common phrase for those who stay up late, because owls are nocturnal. And this artist used the idea of what people do when they stay up late, but kind of worked it within the owl. Another same idea, just a little different. Another version of the night owl. So the analogy is a constructed simile between two things that are unlike. So there's non-symbol analogs, the direct comparisons of different things that somewhat resemble each other. Camera and the human eye. So they somewhat resemble, they see things that serve a direct comparison. A symbolic analogies are metaphors in nature. So the properties transform to each object that spark an insight to an idea. A square can be deemed to be hard, and a circle can be deemed to be soft. Looking at the properties of these things. There's design analogs. So they're direct similarities. So the abstraction of a tree that doesn't much look like a tree. Function, observation of how something works. So a light bulb and getting an idea, something sparks. So those are function analogs. Phenomena analogs. So these are comparisons drawn from phenomena in movement. A picture of a person with many arms could be very busy. Sensory analogs, based on the five senses. Kinetic analogs, think text that looks slimy or soft. Empathy, so these are emotional surrogates. Personal feelings projected, so like rainy day with gray clouds could relate to depression. So we're taking these abstract or more difficult ideas and simplifying them into one frame to communicate a thought. Symbolic analogs, sparks need to communicate a message other than what's represented. So an apple and snake, what does that make you think of? Fantasy, which we will step into with our next set. They conceal meanings and present ambiguity. So understanding metaphors in art. So this is kind of a practice that I took several weeks ago. And it's sort of how we communicate ideas, a little bit about composition, and what we go for. So this is going to be a little easier than the in-person class, so I do apologize. So try to play along. What is the first thing you notice? And what does that thing make you feel? And when I'm asking you for what it makes you feel, it should just be simplified into sort of one word. Don't tell me what it is, just how you feel. So the first thing I notice is the outline of the body on the ground. Now you may notice something completely different. You may get something completely different, and that is fine. So I notice the outline of the body, and then it kind of makes me think of absence. And maybe the metaphor Francesca Woodman was thinking about was absence. Maybe you thought of a different idea or feeling when looking at this. So the first thing I notice is the little boy with binoculars. You may have noticed the moving train. You may have noticed the luggage on the man's head. Or you may have noticed the woman. But now look at that little boy holding his binoculars. I get a feeling of sort of hope. Now there's a lot going on. There's the train that's moving. Is it stopping? Is it going? There's the luggage. But what I get from looking at this photograph is sort of hope. Sort of looking forward to something. So the first thing I notice when I look at this photograph is sort of the face being melted. And I get sort of this distressed feeling when I'm looking at it. Because I understand what it feels to be stressed with the hands on your face, and your face just kind of, ugh. What is the first thing you notice in this painting? And what does it make you feel? I notice a mouth that is sort of covered in this ice creamy mess. And I feel excess. Now you want to take your feelings or your thoughts and very simplify them, because if you can communicate something and simplify it, then it connects with the viewer. So when I look at this painting, I feel erasure. And how do you communicate visually erasure? And this is what artists are using metaphor to communicate. What do you first notice? And how does that make you feel? What do you first notice? And how does that make you feel? What do you first notice? And how does that make you feel? What do you first notice? And how does that make you feel? Now this one's a little different. It's non-representational. We're not taking it from something that we can see and easily understand it. I feel organized chaos when I look at this. Because there's so many textures that are overlapping and connecting, that there's an order to it, but there's a lot going on. I feel stifled when I look at this. Now, I'm not going to get in heavy analysis of these, but sort of think in your first reaction and how it makes you feel. And think about how the artist communicated those thoughts and feelings, those heavy, larger-than-life ideas to you. And that's something that I want you to focus on within the next unit, is how we communicate things that are larger and more abstract. How each part holds meaning within the frame. And how you can use that to communicate ideas that are maybe difficult to communicate with just words. Or it may be too easy to communicate with words and difficult to communicate visually. So definitely keep a lookout on what you see. Go through those design blogs, those art museum websites, and think about how things just make you feel. And then kind of think about that as your intention as an artist. Now there will be some extra readings on Canvas to go over to help you think about more signification and signs as we move forward in the next unit.